Not so fast, Tom Ryan. These have always brought me luck.
Oh, man.
White Diamonds, the intriguing fragrance from Elizabeth Taylor.
Everyone knows Elizabeth Taylor, the icon. Not enough people talk about Elizabeth Taylor, the businesswoman. After 50 years in Hollywood, she pulled off a renaissance in retail. At 59, she launched what would become the best-selling celebrity fragrance of all time and grew it into a billion-dollar legacy. Today, we're breaking down how she did it and why everyone from J.Lo to Ariana is still following the same playbook. Enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. As you know, this has sort of been like a breakdown of celebrity businesses, and last week I talked about these billion-dollar brands, and I had mentioned that 50 Cent was the first big exit that I remember from the celebrity sphere, right? And then I thought to myself, well, that's the first big exit. What's the first celebrity brand that I ever really remember? And if you are my age, so like we'll say 35 and above, you will remember the complete chokehold that White Diamonds had in the industry when we were all kids, right? That was the gift you got for Mother's Day. That was the gift you got for Christmas, at least in my household. My mother would go out and be like, oh my God, there's a gift with purchase. I'm going to buy this because I really like the watch or whatever. So that was really the first brand that I remember it being like a celebrity brand, and highly respected. So I thought, oh, let me do a little more research. And then I wanted to release this on the 27th of February, which also happens to be, if she was still with us, it would have been her 94th birthday. So that is what I'm here. That is what I'm here doing. I'm sort of celebrating, and we're breaking down the billion-dollar industry basically that she created. So we'll just get right into it. Now, I should note that she was not the first celebrity to have a fragrance. I did see a couple of ones, sort of a notable one that's even mentioned in this LA Times article was Sophia Loren. She released a fragrance back in 1981, and it did well when she would do promotional appearances, but then it just didn't do well outside of that. And I found like a magazine advertisement, and it was just kind of like, oh, okay, it's there, but like, why should I buy it? You know, just because she's like holding up something, you know, did she make it? Is she part of, you know, it's sort of like that whole thing. And then Cher released a fragrance, also in the late 80s, I believe 87. That also did not do well, but I think Cher was a little more rock star at the time. Like, she'd wear these really super provocative outfits for the era, like to the Oscars and stuff. And so I think even though she was an Oscar winner and everything, I think she was like a little sort of young and hip, and like, you have to remember the 80s in America were very, very conservative. Like, women couldn't even wear pants to like the Senate buildings until the 90s. Okay, so you have to imagine, like, this is not, women's lib is not where it is today. So and in fact, Cher actually has her own fragrance now anyway, her own fragrance line. But the woman that sort of broke the sort of proverbial ceiling, I can never say that word, on fragrances was actually Elizabeth Taylor. And she she had a fragrance that she worked on for about 2 years that launched in August of 1987, per an LA Times article. Now, what's interesting about the promotional campaign, there's a few things where this differs from White Diamonds. I remember White Diamonds being affordable. You know, you get like a little gift set for $50 or $49.99, right? What I did not know was that the original Passion was selling for $160 an ounce, which was amazing. So, because the Passion that we all remember, like, you can just go get it at CVS, right? It was no 160 back in those days. So, anyway, so interesting little article here. It talks about how she had a 5-week, 9-city introductory tour. So she did the whole mall tour, right? she would autograph posters and have tea with those who were already signed for the $200 Falcons. So it was sort of like almost an appearance fee. And she was going to do this at J.W. Robinson's in Beverly Hills. I wonder if that's an offshoot of Robinson's May. Anyway, so if you can, the article continues. The way that Passion was, I guess, how they paid Elizabeth Taylor was a minimum guarantee and then a percentage of sales. So, and apparently that's how it's done, like, to this day. So as you can see, they're kind of doing the whole blueprint here. Now, you have to remember something. Yes, the state, the U.S. was super conservative. But you also have to remember there was a little tiny bit of nostalgia going on. And I think there was a little bit of sort of this lost generation of people that we didn't really ever acknowledge, not we, but people that were never really acknowledged in marketing unless they were like in the movies. So you have to think Happy Days aired in the 80s and it was sort of that nostalgic, oh, remember how good everything was in the 50s? And that was during Elizabeth Taylor's, peak fame and her movie career. She was born in 1932. So you have to think, right, in the 50s, early 60s, she was 20s to 30s. And you had like shows like Golden Girls kind of coming out. So I think people were realizing, oh, we like never marketed to these people. We're just marketing to boomers now. And they were all young, they were sort of all in their 30s. And it was always like, youth and everything. And Elizabeth Taylor was not young anymore. She was still an icon, but you have to kind of imagine where she is in her life, right? She was an icon. The roles are kind of drying up, right? Hollywood does what it does. It's like, hey, you're of a certain age, like leave. And so I think she just wanted probably something to do, really, because if you look at her roles at this time, she really didn't have a whole lot of roles coming in. And some of the stuff was sort of not deemed, really great work. And she really worked on Passion. And I think even if you smell it now, like you're like, this is a really good fragrance that I can just get at a CVS, right? So Passion launches, they do this multi-city tour, and then basically immediately they start working on white diamonds. Now, I should also note, here's the rest of the blueprint. I wanted to go over this because this is like mental. So, when the perfume, this is from the LA Times article, when the perfume takes off, Taylor certainly will. TV's Our magazine will do a 5-part series on the star. Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous will catalog her perfume tour. Ladies' Home Journal and Parade magazine will feature her on their covers, and Vogue will do a 9-page fashion layout in conjunction with the perfume's launch. And in what's reported as Helen Gurley Brown's first print interview, the editor of Cosmopolitan magazine herself talks with Taylor in the September issue, right? So this was a pretty big launch. But you have to imagine, at $160 an ounce, Passion must have done very, very well for them to do the next launch, which was white diamonds. Now, what I showed you in the intro is a clip from the White Diamonds commercial. If you notice, it's not really a commercial. It's more of like this cinematic, right, moment that you get to have with Elizabeth Taylor. And I think that commercial in and of itself probably carried that perfume for a good 10 to 15 years, right? Now, in 1991, you also have to imagine, 91, Elizabeth Taylor's almost 60 years old, and she comes out looking absolutely fabulous in that white dress, and she throws the earring down, and she's so wonderful, which is why I dressed up today, by the way, because Miss Taylor would not have it any other way. But yeah, so I mean, the commercial itself, I think, was really, it was a cinematic experience. Now, the launch there for White Diamonds, it was the biggest launch for perfume ever. It was a $20 million campaign tour. Now, you can't really find a lot. I found like a couple images on Getty where she did sort of like 2 or 3 appearances. But you know, when you read like the $20 million promotional tour, there's billboards, there's ads, right? She's doing shows. And if they did that for passion, I can imagine they did quite a lot of press for white diamonds. The important thing to note about white diamonds, though, is that Elizabeth Taylor worked on the actual perfume herself. She went in and wanted to do something glamorous, and famously, she only wore her perfumes, which I think is a telltale sign of the fact that you actually like your own work, right? This isn't just a cash grab. And I think people really felt that, right? She invited a way of like, here's this little bit of glamour that's going to live on your vanity. And then when you wake up in the morning and the kids are downstairs screaming or whatever it may be, you know, you're going to be able to spray that on. And then for a second, you're just going to imagine that there you are with Taylor laughing it up, or in a movie or something. You could feel, I remember the packaging was really heavy. I remember that there was a really sort of that diamond encrusted collar that the bottles had. You know, there was sort of a moment that you had with the bottle, if that made sense, that I really haven't seen replicated by any other celebrity perfumes. Now, white diamonds itself was actually 67% of all sales for the company. But it was the first fragrance to reach, or I should say and it was the first fragrance to sell, a celebrity fragrance to sell $1 billion. In fact, in 2018, they said it was published that it had done $1.5 billion by 2018, $3 billion in general. With the success of white diamonds, she ended up launching 3 other perfumes that were sort of off of the white diamonds brand. There was diamonds and emeralds, diamonds and rubies, diamonds and sapphires, which was then copied by Kim Kardashian, alluded to with her sisters back when she had KKW Beauty. And and she's the absolute queen and the reigning champ of celebrity fragrances. Elizabeth Taylor is, like, by far. Now, 2002 rolls around, and somebody by the name of J.Lo comes around, and she launches her own perfume. She launches Glow. I'm thinking, so a few things. 1, Elizabeth Taylor was an icon. 2, she appealed to the younger and the older generation. And I think probably mostly, I would say, late 20s and above is what White Diamonds was marketed to. But you also had 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds were probably wearing it, right? So 10 years goes by, right? She launched, or I should say 11. 11 years goes by. She was 60 or almost 60 when the commercial came out. So she would have almost been 70 when J.Lo's, no, she would have been 70 when J.Lo's Perfume came out. That space of celebrity fragrances only existed with Elizabeth Taylor. No one else really came in and rattled the cage, as it were. I mean, I even looked, the Spice Girls released a fragrance in 1998. But it was more like merch, whereas Elizabeth Taylor sells the experience, right? So J.Lo comes around. Now, you have to, for people who are younger that don't remember this, J.Lo in 2001 was the only artist to ever do this, had the #1 movie and the #1 album out at the same time. She's the only artist to do this. And no one else has been able to do it. No man, no woman, nope, that's it. Like, she, right up there, Ben Affleck, the whole thing. We got like a part 2 a couple years ago. But she was like, there was no one else. Like, J.Lo was pretty much, I mean, and Nicole Kidman and stuff. But like, J.Lo was kind of like the pop diva, right? She was where Nicole Kidman's like this ethereal goddess. You know, J.Lo could just sort of sit on the couch with you and like, talk smack or whatever, you know, or teach you like a cool dance thing in your driveway, and you'd be like, oh my God, it's J.Lo. So anyway, plus I'm Hispanic, so I have a soft spot for like that whole Latino revolution that we had in like the late 90s, you know, with like Ricky Martin and stuff and Cheyenne and like, so anyway, I'm privy to the J.Lo, but So anyway, so she comes out with a fragrance in 2002, and it does her fragrance has done to date has done $2 billion in sales. But her first year, reportedly, she did $100 million in retail for that J.Lo glow, which is like insane. But that also tells you the type of fame that she had at that time, and it was like sexy and it was fresh and it just like the bottle was cool and it was unique and I think like I remember girls, because let's see, 2000, I was in middle school. So like I just remember girls were just like, if you wanted to, like, you were just like cool and like the clean girl aesthetic, and like, you had the J.Lo perfume. You just did. Like the whole classroom just smelled like the J.Lo perfume. That was it. And so I just remember it was sort of fun and it was aspirational, but it really wasn't marketed to women who would wear white diamonds, right? My mom would wear white diamonds. I would want to wear Glow by J.Lo. My mother did not allow me to buy Glow by J.Lo because she does not like J.Lo. Hi, Mom. She didn't like J.Lo very much. But I remember anytime I would go to Macy's, I'd find that bottle and I'd spray it, and so anyway, but that was the sort of, I think people realize, oh, this isn't just like a one-off. Like people like celebrity fragrances. And I think kind of in a way, J.Lo sort of changed the blueprint for that, where it was like, it doesn't have to be a cinematic ad, although I love Elizabeth Taylor's ad. But like she just had really sexy, like, oh, here I am in the shower. And it's like, I'm not going to show you the images, but you can just Google them. I'll show you like the G-rated ones, but there's like a full body shot of like her like sideways, like pinned up against the thing, and and I remember like seeing that and was like kind of uncomfortable, even though she was behind a blurry. Again, we got to wear pants in the 90s, so just bear with me. But I remember seeing the ad in the magazine and just going, oh, like that's like, it's like sexy and like a little naughty and like risque and stuff. But I think they realized, oh, you just need like a really good ad and then like a pretty cool fragrance. And I think because J.Lo's fragrance was sort of fresh and clean and new, and it wasn't that powdery, florally, dinner in Beverly Hills at nighttime with all these older rich people fragrance, I think people really liked that. It was like, oh, I can wear this to the office. This is fun. And then it would have appealed to, older millennials at the time that were like in their teens or, early adulthood. And so J.Lo comes out, basically has control over the celebrity not control, but has the other half of the celebrity fragrance market. And then Paris Hilton and Britney Spears both come out in 2004, and they have their own fragrances as well. Now, they don't have sort of first-year numbers the way that I found J.Lo's, but I did find that Paris Hilton is the second most profitable celebrity when it comes to celebrity fragrances. Since her launch in 2004, so this is, 22 years ago? It's 2004, 22 years ago? Oh my God. She has had $2.5 billion in fragrance sales. Now, she has done that over 30 different perfumes. Pretty good. Jennifer Lopez comes in at number 3 in the market at $2 billion in fragrances with $2 billion in sales in her fragrances, but with 37 different fragrances. Next up, Britney Spears. I remember that commercial. I had that bottle. Curious. It was super cute. She had $1.5 billion in sales from 47 cents. 47. And then Ariana Grande comes out in 2015. She's a singer, for those of you who have been living under a rock, because she's got some pretty big hits. But she's had $1 billion in sales with 15 cents. So what's interesting about Ariana's is that they kind of capitalized on the Baccarat Rouge 540 fandom. And I mention this because it's impressive. A billion with only 15 cents is amazing because, 1.5 with 47 cents, right? I'm saying scents like the actual fragrances, perfumes. But what I find interesting with Ariana is that, so I was a flight attendant during this time, and I remember some people that didn't even listen to her music bought that perfume because they liked the Baccarat Rouge 540 smell, but they didn't want to pay like the $400 a bottle or whatever it was. So they would actually buy that as like a good dupe. And so people that, and I remember like passengers would just kind of spray it around, like you just walk through like, oh, there's Ariana's scent again. Cause no one's going to be spraying, spraying, Baccarat Rouge 540 all around. So that was kind of interesting. But if you break it down per scent, per perfume, this is where it gets really interesting. Elizabeth Taylor, as we reviewed, did $3 billion with a B dollars in sales. White Diamonds made up for almost 70% of that. She only made 12 different scents. That's it. Just 12. $3 billion. Amazing. Where Paris Hilton had to come up with 30, J.Lo came up with 37, and Britney Spears had 47. Per scent, per perfume, I actually broke it down. Per scent average, no pun intended, because I literally wrote that without actually saying that out loud. $250 million is the breakdown. Paris Hilton's comes out to 83 with 2.5 billion in sales with 30 different perfumes. J.Lo's is 2 billion in sales with 37 different perfumes. Britney Spears 1.5 billion with 47 different perfumes. So it's interesting. So that comes out to 31 million per average. J.Lo's is 54 million. Paris is 83 million. And Elizabeth Taylor 250 million. So Elizabeth Taylor is still the undisputed queen. Editing Rachel here, I forgot to mention that her perfume is still wildly successful. And if you go check on Amazon, you can see that just in the past month alone, 5,000 bottles were purchased, which comes out to one bottle every 8 minutes. And yes, I cross-checked all the other celebrities I mentioned, and no, their numbers are nowhere near as close. Now, she did it with far fewer launches because I think she realized you don't need to flood the market. You just need a handful of really good scents that people keep coming back to. People who were fans of White Diamonds probably went out and bought diamonds and rubies, diamonds and emeralds, diamonds and sapphires, and they wanted the whole collection, right? So, but people would go back to White Diamonds because it was such a signature scent. I think it kind of has a similar profile to a Chanel No. 5, but it's obviously much more affordable, and you get to have the glamour of Elizabeth Taylor attached to it. The other thing I should note is, and a lesson to be learned, is not all of your money has to be made when you're young. And I say this because everyone sort of thinks, oh, well, once you hit blah, 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 once you hit this age, it's all downhill from there and you're pretty much done and you're never going to do anything, right? And we're kind of just taught that. That's not really the case. I went back and I added up all of the numbers all the box offices that Elizabeth Taylor had. And I wanted to see what her history was. All of her movies combined, up until that point, made $600 million. $600 million, which is great. Awesome. Amazing. From 9 all the way to 60, right? $600 million. Her fragrances did $3 billion in 20 years, right? Amazing. Amazing. And you have to think, even if she's taking 10% of $3 billion, that's marvelous on top of promotional fees and all that other stuff. But you know, she basically set up this blueprint and then got wealthier than she had ever been before. 600 million is very respectable. She's not taking home 600 million. That's just what her movies did at the box office. So she goes from that to then having $1.5 billion fragrance by 2018. It's amazing. So she probably did $1 billion in sales in the time that she was still alive, maybe even a little more, $1.2 billion, somewhere around there. So she became wealthier from the sale of fragrances than she ever did in any of her movies, which is just, I mean, it's really just fascinating when you think about that. And I think that in today's market, where you have sort of this influx and like sort of this flood of just perfume sales, I think everyone's sort of been chasing that. It's like Beyonce had, and probably still has a fragrance. Shakira has a fragrance. Like Tim McGraw had a fragrance, right? Like everyone's got perfumes, but no one really quite did it like Elizabeth Taylor. And I think it's a combination of her being passionate about it, her wanting to do it, where it wasn't just a cash grab, right? And that's really what it comes down to, is just being authentic. And that's what she sold, right? That's what she gave us. She gave us glamour on our vanity. She gave us this sort of moment of timelessness that we could spend with her. And that's what Elizabeth Taylor really deserves. I mean, we're not going to, for her birthday at least, I'm not going to remember her diamonds or her men or her movie roles. I'm going to remember that she took a chance on herself and bet on herself and then did well, you know, because she came from a place of authenticity. And that's something you just don't see a lot in celebrity brands. And I think that the people can sense that in one way or another. You know, you can just have a star sit on the couch and go, yeah, I really like it. It's bubblegummy and it's fruity. And they just go, okay. Like, you know, where Elizabeth Taylor sort of embodied the bottle, right? She was just... people would say, yeah, she wears, like, you talk to celebrities, yep, she's wearing white diamonds, yep, she's wearing passion tonight, you know. Yeah, so I think that's a really cool thing about it. So happy birthday, Elizabeth Taylor, and thank you for teaching us that you can just be yourself.